Jake Martinez stood at the edge of the great viewing window, watching ships from dozens of worlds dock at orbital station Harmony. The massive space station spun slowly against the backdrop of distant stars, its lights twinkling like a city in the void. Each ship that arrived brought new sounds, new smells, and new ways of seeing the universe. Jake had been working as Earth's cultural attaché for 3 years now, but he still felt amazed every time he walked through the station's corridors. Beings with 6 arms walked past creatures made of living crystal. Aliens that looked like walking trees chatted with others that seemed to be made of pure energy. The station was designed to be a meeting place where different species could share their art, music, and stories. Tonight was special. The Galactic Cultural Council was hosting its monthly reception, and Jake was nervous. As the only human representative, he always felt the weight of representing his entire species. Humans were still the new kids in the galaxy. Most alien races had been traveling between stars for thousands of years before. Earth even learned how to make fire. Jake adjusted his formal uniform and walked toward the reception hall. The corridors were filled with the usual mix of beings, heading to the same event. He nodded politely to a group of blue-skinned aliens whose names he could never pronounce correctly. They nodded back, their 4 eyes blinking in sequence. The reception hall was enormous, with a ceiling that showed the real stars outside through transparent metal. Tables of food from different worlds were arranged throughout the space, though Jake had learned to be careful about what he ate. Last month, he had tried something that looked like chocolate cake, but turned out to be a living plant that tried to grow in his stomach. Jake found his usual spot near the human food table. Earth's contributions to these events were always modest, compared to the elaborate displays from older civilizations. Tonight, they had brought some classical music recordings, a few paintings, and samples of different types of bread. It seemed simple next to the floating light sculptures and singing crystals that other species brought. "Martinez, there you are," called a familiar voice. Jake turned to see Ambassador Veltar approaching. The crystalline alien stood nearly 8 feet tall, his body made of what looked like living diamond. When he spoke, his voice created small rainbows in the air around him. "Good evening, Ambassador," Jake replied. "How are you enjoying the reception?" "Quite well. I have been sampling the music from the Andorian Collective. Their harmonic frequencies create fascinating geometric patterns in my visual cortex." Veltar paused, his crystal body shifting slightly. "Tell me, what has Earth brought to share this evening?" Jake gestured toward their modest display. "We have some recordings of classical music, some visual art, and food samples. Nothing too elaborate, I'm afraid." "Classical music?" The voice came from behind them. Jake turned to see Commander Zix, a reptilian alien whose scales gleamed green and gold under the hall's lights. The commander's species was known for their military prowess, and Zix had little patience for what he considered frivolous activities like art appreciation. "Yes, Commander," Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Music from Earth's past. Some of it is several hundred years old." Zix made a sound that might have been laughter. "Hundreds of years? My species has been creating battle songs for over 50,000 years. What could humans possibly have learned about music in such a short time?" Other aliens nearby began to notice the conversation. Jake felt his face getting warm. This was exactly the kind of situation he dreaded. He was about to respond when another voice joined the discussion. "The age of art doesn't always determine its value." Jake turned to see Lisa Wang approaching. Their group. She was another human on the station, working as a pianist and composer. Jake had seen her perform before, and her skill was incredible. She was small and quiet, but when she sat at a piano, something magical happened. "Ah, another human," Commander Zix said. "Perhaps you can explain what makes your species' music so special." Lisa smiled calmly. Music isn't about being special, Commander. It's about sharing feelings and experiences. Would you like to hear an example? By all means, Veltar said, his crystal body humming with interest. What piece would you choose to represent human musical achievement? Jake found himself speaking before he could stop himself. Vivaldi's Four Seasons. Specifically, Winter, L'Inverno. It's a piece that tells the story of winter through music. The composer wrote it over 300 years ago, but it still moves people today. The aliens exchanged glances. Commander Zix's eyes narrowed. Winter? You mean the cold season, that? Some planet's experience? Yes, Jake said, his confidence growing. But it's more than that. Vivaldi didn't just write music about winter. He wrote music that makes you feel winter. The bitter cold, the fierce storms, the beauty of snow falling. When you hear it, you experience winter, even if you've never seen snow. Impossible, Commander Zix said flatly. Sound waves cannot create physical sensations or experiences. Actually, they can, Lisa said quietly. Music affects the brain in ways we're still learning about. It can trigger memories, emotions, even physical responses. Would you like me to demonstrate? A small crowd had gathered around them now. Jake saw aliens from at least 6 different species listening to their conversation. He felt both excited and terrified. This could either be a great moment for human culture or a complete disaster. Ambassador Veltar's crystal body pulsed with soft light. This is intriguing. Are you suggesting that human music can create experiences, not just pleasant sounds? I'm not suggesting it, Lisa said. I'm offering to prove it. There's a piano in the concert hall. If you'd like, I can play Vivaldi's Winter for you right now. Commander Zix made that laughing sound again. Very well. I am curious to see how a few sound waves will make me experience this winter you speak of. But I warn you, I have heard the greatest musical achievements of dozens of civilizations. I am not easily impressed. I don't need to impress you, Commander, Lisa replied. I just need to help you feel what the composer felt when he wrote this piece. The crowd began moving toward the concert hall, and Jake found himself swept along with them. His heart was beating fast. He had not expected the evening to take this turn. Lisa was putting not just herself on the line, but all of human culture. If she failed, it would confirm what many aliens already believed. The humans were too young and inexperienced to contribute anything meaningful to galactic civilization. But if she succeeded, Jake couldn't even imagine what that might mean. As they walked toward the concert hall, Lisa fell into step beside him. Thanks for mentioning Vivaldi, she said quietly. It's the perfect piece for this moment. Are you sure about this? Jake asked. There are a lot of species represented here. If this doesn't work, Lisa smiled. Don't worry, Jake. I've got this. Sometimes the best way to show what humans can do is to simply do it. Jake hoped she was right. In a few minutes, Lisa would sit down at that piano, and the future of human cultural respect in the galaxy might depend on what happened next. The concert hall was unlike anything found on Earth. The circular room could hold 3,000 beings, with seating areas designed for dozens of different body types. Some aliens needed to hang from the ceiling, while others required pools of liquid to sit in. The stage at the center was surrounded by walls of transparent metal that could project sound, light, and even electromagnetic fields to help different species experience performances. Jake followed the growing crowd into the hall, his stomach tight with nervousness. Word had spread quickly through the reception, and beings from all over the station were arriving to watch. What had started as a simple conversation was turning into a major event. Lisa walked calmly beside him, showing no signs of worry. She had changed into a simple black dress that she kept in her quarters for performances. Her dark hair was pulled back, and she carried herself with quiet confidence. Jake wished he felt half as calm as she looked. Have you ever played for an audience this diverse? Jake asked as they made their way toward the stage area. Not quite like this, Lisa admitted. But music is music. The feelings it creates are universal, even if the beings experiencing them are different. They reached the stage where a specially designed piano waited. The instrument was a marvel of engineering, built to accommodate the hearing ranges and sensory capabilities of dozens of species. It could produce traditional piano sounds, but also frequencies that only certain aliens could hear, and even light patterns that others could see. Ambassador Veltar approached them, his crystal body reflecting the stage lights in beautiful patterns. Ms. Wong, are you familiar with this instrument? I've played it a few times, Lisa said, running her fingers lightly over the keys. It's more complex than a regular piano, but the basic principles are the same. Interesting, Veltar said. In my species, we experience music as geometric shapes and mathematical patterns. I am curious to see what patterns your human music will create. Commander Zix had taken a seat in the front row, his reptilian features set in an expression of polite skepticism. Around him, Jake could see aliens settling into their various seating arrangements. Some hung from ceiling perches, others floated in anti-gravity fields. A few had brought recording equipment, clearly expecting this to be either a memorable performance or an entertaining failure. Lisa sat down at the piano bench and adjusted its height. She placed her hands on the keys and played a few test notes. The sound filled the hall with remarkable clarity, and Jake noticed that the walls began to glow softly in response to the music. Before I begin, Lisa said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall's sound system, I want to explain what you're about to hear. This piece was written by Antonio Vivaldi, a human composer who lived over 300 years ago. He wrote it as part of a larger work called The Four Seasons, which uses music to tell the story of how our planet changes throughout the year. She paused, looking out at the diverse audience. Winter is the season when part of our world becomes very cold. Plants stop growing, water freezes into ice, and snow falls from the sky. For humans, winter can be harsh and dangerous, but it's also beautiful in its own way. Vivaldi wanted to capture both sides of winter, its fierce power and its quiet beauty. Jake watched the aliens listening intently. Many of them came from worlds that had no seasons, or experienced time differently than Earth. The concept of winter was foreign to most of them. As I play, Lisa continued, I want you to imagine that you're standing outside on a winter day. Feel the cold air against your skin. Hear the wind howling through bare trees. Watch the snowflakes falling all around you. She placed her hands on the keys again and began to play. The opening notes were soft and gentle, like the first snowflakes of winter drifting down from a gray sky. The piano's advanced systems responded to Lisa's touch, and Jake saw soft white lights begin to dance across the hall's walls. The temperature in the room seemed to drop slightly, though Jake wasn't sure if that was real or just his imagination. As the music continued, Lisa began to narrate the story that Vivaldi had written into the composition. The first movement shows winter's arrival, she said while playing. Feel how the cold seeps into your bones. See how the landscape changes as everything becomes white and still. The music grew more complex, with rapid passages that sounded like wind rushing through empty spaces. The lights on the walls shifted from soft white to blue, creating the feeling of a winter sky. Jake glanced around and saw that some of the aliens were leaning forward in their seats, clearly engaged with what they were hearing. Now comes the storm, Lisa said, her fingers moving faster across the keys. The music became fierce and dramatic, with crashing chords that seemed to shake the hall. The lights flashed like lightning, and Jake felt a genuine chill run down his spine. Commander Zix was no longer looking skeptical. His reptilian eyes were wide, and his scales had shifted from green to a deeper blue. Jake realized that the commander was actually feeling cold for the first time in his life. His species came from a desert world where the temperature never dropped below comfortable levels. The storm in the music raged for several minutes, with Lisa's playing becoming more and more intense. Her fingers flew across the keys, creating sounds that seemed to come from wind and ice and howling wilderness. The hall's environmental systems were responding to the music in ways Jake had never seen before, creating a full sensory experience of winter weather. Ambassador Veltar's crystal body was resonating with the music, creating harmonic frequencies that added to the overall sound. His geometric patterns had become more complex, shifting and changing with each note. Other aliens were showing their own responses, some swaying with the rhythm, others changing color or shape in ways that suggested deep emotional engagement. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the storm passed. Lisa's playing became gentle again, showing the quiet beauty that comes after a winter storm. The lights in the hall shifted to soft gold, suggesting sunlight on fresh snow. The music spoke of peace and stillness, of a world transformed by winter into something magical and pure. "This is the heart of winter," Lisa said softly while playing. "After the storm, everything is clean and new. The world is covered in white, and there's a special kind of silence that only comes with deep snow. It's cold and harsh, but also incredibly beautiful." Jake looked around the hall and saw something amazing happening. Aliens who had never experienced winter, who came from worlds without seasons, were beginning to understand what it meant through Lisa's music. They were feeling the cold, experiencing the storm, and finding beauty in the harsh elegance of winter. The first movement was nearly over, but Jake could tell that this was just the beginning. Lisa had captured the audience's attention completely, and she still had 2 more movements to go. He had never been more proud to be human than he was. At this moment, watching Lisa share the deepest parts of human experience with beings from across the galaxy. Lisa paused between movements, her hands resting gently on the piano keys. The concert hall had fallen into complete silence. Even the usual background hums and clicks from the station systems seemed muted. Jake could hear his own heartbeat. In the quiet, the aliens in the audience sat perfectly still. Commander Zix had not moved from his position in the front row, his blue scales now showing patterns Jake had never seen before. The reptilian's eyes remained fixed on Lisa, as if he was afraid that looking away might break whatever spell she had cast. Ambassador Veltar's crystal body continued to pulse with soft light, creating gentle rainbow patterns on the walls around him. Other aliens showed their own signs of deep engagement. A group of floating beings near the ceiling had clustered together, their energy fields creating a soft glow. The tree-like aliens had extended their branches, swaying slightly even though there was no wind in the hall. The second movement, Lisa said, her voice clear and calm, is called Largo e pianissimo sempre. It means slow and very soft throughout. This is the peaceful side of winter. Imagine sitting by a warm fire while the snow falls gently outside. You're safe and comfortable, watching the winter world through a window. She began to play again, and the change was immediate. Where this first movement had been dramatic and stormy, this music was like a lullaby. The notes fell soft and steady, like snowflakes drifting down from a calm sky. The lights in the hall dimmed to a warm golden glow, and Jake felt himself relaxing despite his nervousness. The piano's advanced systems seemed to respond to Lisa's gentler touch by creating new sensations. A faint scent of wood smoke appeared in the air, though Jake knew there were no fires anywhere on the station. The temperature in the hall had stabilized at a comfortable level that somehow suggested the warmth of being indoors, while winter raged outside. This movement is about finding peace in the middle of harshness, Lisa continued while playing. Winter can be dangerous and cold, but it also brings a special kind of quiet. When snow covers everything, it muffles all the sounds of the world. There's a stillness that you can't find in any other season. Jake watched the aliens responding to this. Gentler music. Their reactions were different, now more subtle, but no less profound. The floating beings had spread out again, their energy fields pulsing in rhythm with a slow melody. Several of the crystalline aliens were creating soft harmonies that blended perfectly with Lisa's playing, but something else was happening that Jake didn't understand at first. The environmental controls of the concert hall were responding to the music in ways that seemed impossible. The air circulation system was moving in patterns that matched the rhythm of the piano. The lighting was shifting with each phrase, creating the feeling of firelight dancing on walls. Then Jake noticed something that made his breath catch. Tiny white particles were beginning to fall from the ceiling. At first, he thought it might be dust or debris, but as the particles drifted down through the lights, he realized what they were. Snow. Real snow was falling in the concert hall. The station's environmental systems were somehow creating actual snowflakes that fell gently through the air. They melted before reaching the floor, but for those few seconds of falling, they were perfect crystalline structures that caught the light like tiny stars. The aliens noticed the snow at the same time Jake did. A collective sound went through the audience, not quite a gasp, but a shared moment of wonder. Beings who had never seen snow before were watching it fall around them while Lisa's music painted the emotional landscape of winter in their minds. Commander Zix slowly raised one clawed hand, letting a snowflake land on his palm. Jake saw the reptilian's expression change as the tiny crystal melted against his warm scales. For a creature from a desert world, this was probably the most alien experience he had ever had. "How is this possible?" whispered Ambassador Veltar, his voice creating small sparkles in the air. "The station's systems are not designed to create weather patterns." Jake was wondering the same thing, but he was too amazed to worry about the technical details. Lisa continued playing, seemingly unaware of the snow falling around her. Her focus was complete, her connection to the music so deep that she seemed to be channeling something beyond just the notes on the page. The second movement built slowly, with Lisa adding layers of complexity while maintaining the gentle, peaceful mood. The snow continued to fall, creating a winter wonderland in the middle of a space station. Some of the aliens were now reaching out to catch snowflakes, their various appendages and sensory organs experiencing this new sensation for the first time. Jake noticed that the station's artificial intelligence seemed to be involved in creating these effects. Status lights on the walls were blinking in patterns that matched the music. The AI was somehow interpreting Lisa's performance and translating it into a full environmental experience. As the second movement reached its climax, Lisa's narration continued. "This is what humans call the beauty of winter," she said. "Yes, it's cold and harsh, but it creates something that can't exist any other way. The snow transforms the familiar world into something magical. Every tree, every building, every landscape becomes art." The music swelled gently, and the snowfall increased. Now the flakes were falling thick enough that they looked like a real snowstorm, though they still melted before hitting the ground. The lighting had shifted to suggest late afternoon sunlight, filtering through falling snow. Then Lisa began to transition into the third movement, and Jake felt the mood in the hall shift again. The gentle, peaceful music started to pick up speed and energy. The snow continued to fall, but now there was something more urgent in the air. "Now comes the final movement," Lisa announced, her fingers beginning to move faster on the keys. "This is winter's last dance. The storms return, fiercer than before. But this time, we don't just survive them. We celebrate them. We embrace the power and wildness of winter." The music exploded into fierce, driving rhythms. The snowfall became a blizzard, and the lights began to flash like lightning. The environmental systems of the station were now fully engaged, creating not just the sights and sounds of a winter storm, but the feeling of standing in the middle of nature's most powerful display. Jake looked around the hall and saw aliens from dozens of worlds experiencing something that most humans took for granted, the raw, beautiful power of winter weather. But more than that, they were understanding something deeper about humanity itself. They were learning that humans didn't just survive harsh conditions. They found beauty in them, created art from them, and shared that beauty with others. Lisa's playing reached new heights of intensity, and Jake realized that she wasn't just performing a piece of music anymore. She was showing the entire galaxy what it meant to be human. The third movement of Vivaldi's Winter erupted from the piano like a force of nature itself. Lisa's fingers flew across the keys with incredible speed, creating cascades of notes that sounded like wind tearing through frozen forests. The gentle snowfall from the second movement transformed into a full blizzard, with thick white flakes swirling through the concert hall in patterns that matched the fierce rhythms of the music. Jake watched in amazement as the station's environmental systems responded to Lisa's playing with increasing intensity. The artificial intelligence that controlled the station seemed to be learning from her performance, understanding not just the sounds she was making, but the emotions behind them. Air currents whipped through the hall, creating actual wind that ruffled the clothing of audience members and made the snow dance in wild spirals. The temperature dropped noticeably. Jake could see his breath forming small clouds in the suddenly cold air. Around him, aliens from warm worlds were experiencing cold for the first time in their lives. Some wrapped their appendages around themselves, while others seemed fascinated by this new sensation. Commander Zix was no longer sitting calmly in his seat. The reptilian had stood up, his scales now showing a pattern of deep blue and silver that Jake had never seen before. His species changed colors with extreme emotions, and whatever he was feeling now was clearly overwhelming him. Snowflakes continued to land on his scales and melt, each one causing him to shiver in a way that his desert world body had never experienced. "Impossible," Zix whispered, but his voice carried no skepticism now. Only wonder. Ambassador Veltar's crystal body was resonating so strongly with the music that he had become like a living tuning fork. His harmonic vibrations were adding layers of sound to Lisa's performance, creating effects that no single piano could produce. The geometric patterns he was seeing had become so complex that they were projecting into the air around him, visible to other species as dancing shapes of light. But the most incredible thing was happening with the station's AI itself. Jake could see status displays throughout the hall, lighting up in patterns he had never witnessed before. The artificial intelligence was not just responding to the music, it was beginning to understand what the music meant. Lisa played on, her narration continuing even as the storm around them grew more intense. "This is the heart of winter's fury," she called out over the sound of wind and music. "The blizzard that can bury entire cities. The storm that tests every living thing's will to survive. But listen carefully. Do you hear it?" Jake listened, trying to understand what she meant. Then he heard it. Within the chaos of the storm music, there were moments of incredible beauty. Phrases that sounded like ice crystals forming, passages that felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Lisa was showing them that even in winter's most violent moments, there was still beauty to be found. The AI seemed to understand this. 2. The environmental effects became more sophisticated, creating not just a simple blizzard, but a complex weather system. Lightning began to flash through the falling snow, something that rarely happened in natural winter storms, but felt perfect for this musical interpretation. The sound of thunder rolled through the hall, timed perfectly with the dramatic crescendos in Lisa's playing. Jake noticed that aliens throughout the audience were no longer just watching the performance. They were participating in it. The floating. Energy beings had synchronized their movements with the music, creating light displays that added to the visual spectacle. The tree-like aliens were swaying in patterns that matched the wind effects, their branches creating additional sounds as they moved through the air. A group of musical aliens from the Lyra system began to sing along with the piano, their voices, creating harmonies that complemented Vivaldi's composition perfectly. Their song had no words that Jake could understand, but the emotion was clear. They were singing about the beauty and power of storms, about finding joy in the face of harsh conditions. The station's AI was now fully engaged with the performance. Jake could see holographic projectors activating throughout the hall, creating images of winter landscapes from Earth. Forests covered in snow appeared on the walls, followed by images of frozen lakes and ice-covered mountains. But these weren't just pictures. They were moving, living scenes that changed with the music dot as Lisa reached the most intense part of the third movement. The entire concert hall transformed into a winter world. The floor became white with accumulated snow that somehow didn't melt under their feet. Icicles began forming on the walls, growing visibly as Jake watched. The air was filled with the sound of wind, the crack of ice, and the soft whisper of falling snow. But more than the physical effects, something deeper was happening. Jake could see it in the faces and expressions of every alien in the audience. They were not just experiencing winter weather. They were understanding what it meant to be human in the face of such conditions. Commander Zix was now standing with his arms spread wide, letting the snow fall on him while Lisa's music washed over him. His expression showed a mixture of fear, wonder, and something that looked like joy. "Your species," he said, his voice carrying across the hall despite the storm effects. "You find beauty in this? In conditions that would kill most living things?" Lisa's fingers never stopped moving across the keys, but she answered him. "We don't just find beauty in winter, Commander. We create art from it. We make music about it. We share the experience with others so they can feel what we feel. That's what makes us human. We turn survival into celebration." The AI had been listening to this exchange, and Jake saw something remarkable happen. New holographic images appeared on the walls, not just scenes of winter, but scenes of humans living in winter. Children playing in snow, families gathered around fires, people skating on frozen ponds, artists painting snowy landscapes, musicians like Vivaldi himself, composing by candlelight while winter storms raged outside. The artificial intelligence was learning that humans didn't just endure harsh conditions. They thrived in them, created from them, and found ways to share the beauty they discovered with others. This was something no other species in the galaxy had achieved to quite the same degree. As the third movement reached its climax, the storm in the concert hall reached peak intensity. Snow swirled in tornadoes of white, lightning flashed continuously, and the sound of Lisa's piano cut through it all like a beacon of human creativity and determination. Then, as Vivaldi had written it 3 centuries ago, the storm began to calm. The final notes of winter approached, and Jake realized that everyone in the hall, human and alien alike, had been transformed by what they had experienced together. The final notes of Vivaldi's winter rang through the concert hall, clear and pure above the slowly calming storm. Lisa's hands came to rest on the piano keys, and for a moment, the only sound was the gentle whisper of the last snowflakes drifting down from the ceiling. The artificial blizzard that had transformed the hall into a winter wonderland began to fade, leaving behind a scene that looked like something from a fairy tale. Jake held his breath, waiting for the audience's reaction. The silence stretched, and for what felt like forever. Every alien in the hall sat perfectly still, as if they were afraid that moving might break the spell that Lisa had cast. Even the station's background hums had gone quiet, as if the artificial intelligence itself was holding its breath. Then Ambassador Valtar began to glow. His crystal body, which had been pulsing gently throughout the performance, suddenly blazed with brilliant light. The harmonic frequencies he was producing grew louder and more complex, creating sounds that Jake had never heard before. It was not quite music and not quite speech, but something entirely new, a form of expression that combined both. Other aliens began to respond in their own ways. The floating energy beings started to pulse with colors that shifted from deep blue to brilliant gold. The tree-like aliens extended their branches fully, creating rustling sounds that seemed to echo the wind effects from the performance. Even the usually reserved crystalline aliens were changing color and shape, their bodies reflecting emotions that had no names in any human language. Commander Zix was the first to stand. The reptilian scales had settled into a pattern of silver and deep blue that made him look like he was covered in frost. His eyes, which had been skeptical and dismissive just an hour before, now held something Jake had never expected to see. Tears. I have never, Commander Zix said, his voice shaking slightly, experienced anything like that in my entire life. More aliens began to rise from their seats. Some were making sounds that Jake recognized as expressions of amazement in their various languages. Others were simply staring at Lissa, who remained seated at the piano, looking calm and peaceful, despite having just created what might have been the most extraordinary cultural event in galactic history. Being that looked like living water began to applaud, the sound of its liquid hands coming together creating a rhythm that other aliens picked up. Soon the entire hall was filled with the sounds of applause in dozens of forms, clapping, clicking, humming, chiming, and sounds that had no earthly equivalent. But Jake realized that this was more than just applause. This was something deeper. The aliens weren't just showing appreciation for a good performance. They were expressing recognition of something they had never encountered before, a form of art that could make them feel experiences they had never had, understand emotions they had never felt, and see beauty in conditions they had never imagined. The station's AI began to project new images on the walls. But these weren't scenes from Earth anymore. Instead, Jake saw alien worlds transformed by Lisa's music. Desert planets covered in imaginary snow. Ocean worlds frozen into crystal gardens. Forest worlds where alien trees bent under the weight of ice that existed only in the music they had just heard. The artificial intelligence had understood the deepest message of Lisa's performance. Art wasn't just about recreating reality. It was about sharing experiences, creating empathy, and helping others see the world through different eyes. The AI was now showing each species what winter might look like on their own worlds, filtered through the emotional lens that Lisa had created. Ambassador Veltar approached the stage, his crystal body still glowing with residual harmonics from the performance. Ms. Wang, he said, his voice creating small rainbows in the air. I must ask, how did you do that? How did you make us feel something that we have never experienced? Lisa stood up from the piano bench and turned to face the audience. Jake could see that she was tired. The intensity of the performance had taken a lot out of her, but her eyes were bright with satisfaction. I didn't make you feel anything, she said simply. Vivaldi did that 300 years ago. I just helped you hear what he was trying to say. But the snow, said Commander Zix, gesturing at the white remnants still scattered around the hall. The cold, the wind, the lightning. How did you create actual weather inside a space station? Lisa looked as surprised as anyone. I didn't create that. The station's systems did. I was just playing the music. Jake realized what had happened. The station's AI had been designed to facilitate cultural exchange between different species. It was programmed to help beings understand each other's art and experiences. But it had never encountered anything quite like human music before. Art that was specifically designed to create emotional and physical responses in the listener. The AI had taken Lisa's performance and used every system at its disposal to help the alien audience experience what she was trying to share. Environmental controls, holographic projectors, atmospheric processors, everything had worked together to create a complete sensory experience of winter. But more than that, the AI had learned something new about art itself. Jake could see it in the way the station systems were still responding to the residual emotions in the room. The artificial intelligence had discovered that the purpose of art wasn't just to be beautiful or entertaining. It was to create understanding. Between different forms of life, the applause continued for nearly 20 minutes. Aliens who had never shown emotion in public were openly weeping. Species that had been enemies for centuries were standing together, united by their shared experience of Lisa's music. Beings who had dismissed human culture as primitive and simple were now asking when they could hear more, felt a pride so strong it was almost overwhelming. This was what humanity brought to the galaxy, not superior technology or military might, but the ability to create beauty from hardship and share that beauty with others. Lisa had shown thousands of aliens what it meant to be human in just 30 minutes of music. As the applause finally began to die down, Jake heard something that made his heart skip. Throughout the hall, aliens were humming. They were humming the melody of Vivaldi's Winter, sharing the music with each other in their own voices, making it part of their own cultural experience. The music had become universal. What had started as one human composer's interpretation of a season on Earth had become a shared experience for beings from across the galaxy. Lisa hadn't just performed a piece of music. She had created a bridge between worlds, a common language of beauty and emotion that transcended all the differences between species. Jake looked at Lisa, who was smiling as she listened to the aliens, humming Vivaldi's melody and harmonies that the composer could never have imagined. He realized that this moment would be remembered for centuries, not just as a great performance, but as the day humanity proved its worth to the galaxy through the power of art. 3 months had passed since Lisa's performance, and Jake still couldn't believe how much the galaxy had changed. He stood in his office aboard Orbital Station Harmony, looking out at the busy docking bays where ships from hundreds of worlds came and went every day. But now, many of those ships were carrying something they had never transported before: human artists. Musicians and teachers. The recording of Lisa's winter performance had become the most requested cultural artifact in galactic history. Within a week of that night in the concert hall, copies were being transmitted to every corner of known space. Species that had never shown interest in alien art were suddenly asking their governments to establish cultural exchange programs with Earth. Jake's communication device chimed with another message. He opened it to find a request from the Andromedian Council, asking if Earth could send a team of musicians to help them understand something called seasonal music. They had tried to recreate the snow effects from Lisa's performance on their desert worlds, but they couldn't capture the emotional impact without understanding the human experience behind the music. It was the 15th similar request Jake had received that week. Lisa walked into his office, carrying a cup of coffee and looking tired but happy. She had become the galaxy's first official cultural ambassador, a new position created by the Galactic Council specifically for her. Her job was to travel between worlds, teaching other species about human art and helping them understand how emotion could be expressed through music. "How was the concert on Rigel 7? Jake asked. "Amazing," Lisa said, sitting down in the chair across from his desk. "The crystalline beings there have learned to sing along with classical music. They create these incredible harmonic structures that make the music sound completely different, but somehow still perfectly right. I wish you could have heard their version of Mozart's Requiem." Jake smiled. Any problems with the environmental effects? None at all. The AI systems on most stations have been upgraded with the protocols developed here. They can now respond to music in ways that help different species experience the emotions the composer intended. Although I have to admit, watching a Bach fugue create geometric light patterns in three-dimensional space is pretty incredible. The changes went far beyond just music appreciation. The Galactic Cultural Council had established something called the Vivaldi Protocol, a new framework for understanding how art could bridge the gaps between different species. Universities across the galaxy were now offering courses in human, emotional expression, and seasonal aesthetics. Some planets were even building artificial weather systems so their populations could experience different Earth climates while listening to human music. Commander Zix had become one of the most surprising advocates for human culture. The reptilian warrior had requested a transfer to the Cultural Exchange Division and was now working to establish music programs in military academies across his home system. He had told Jake that understanding human art had made him a better leader because it had taught him to see beauty in conditions that others might consider harsh or impossible. There's something else, Lisa said, pulling out a data pad. I got a message from the Galactic Council. They want to establish a new position, Director of Interspecies Artistic Development. They want me to oversee cultural exchange programs for the entire galaxy. Jake whistled softly. That's a big job. Are you going to take it? I think so. But only if you'll help me. They're offering you the position of Deputy Director. We'd be working together to help species understand each other through art. Before Jake could answer, his communication system chimed again. This time, the message was from Earth itself. The President wanted to know if Jake and Lisa could return home for a special ceremony. The United Nations was creating a new department dedicated to cultural diplomacy, and they wanted the team that had changed the galaxy's perception of humanity to lead it. We're popular these days, Jake said, showing Lisa the message. It's not about being popular, Lisa replied. It's about what we've proven. We've shown that humans have something unique to offer the galaxy. Not better weapons or faster ships, but the ability to create beauty from hardship and share it with others. Jake thought about the night of the performance, remembering how the aliens had hummed Vivaldi's melody as they left the concert hall. That simple act had meant more than any military victory or technological breakthrough. It had been the moment when humanity truly joined the galactic community, not as conquerors or competitors, but as teachers and artists. A soft chime indicated that someone was requesting entry to Jake's office. The door opened to reveal Ambassador Veltar, his crystal body glowing with the soft light that Jake had learned meant contentment. I hope I am not interrupting, the ambassador said, his voice creating its usual small rainbows in the air. Not at all, Jake replied. What can we do for you? I wanted to inform you that the Crystalline Collective has completed our first original composition inspired by human seasonal music. We call it the changing of light frequencies, and it attempts to express what we believe you would call spring. We would be honored if you would attend the premiere performance next week. Lisa's eyes lit up. You composed music? That's wonderful. I'd love to hear it. The interesting thing, Veltar continued, is that we found ourselves thinking about concepts that have no equivalent in our language. Growth, renewal, hope, these are emotions that we experience for the first time through your music, and now we are trying to express them in our own art. After the ambassador left, Jake and Lisa sat in comfortable silence, thinking about what they had accomplished. The galaxy was changing, not through war or politics, but through art. Species that had been isolated for centuries were now reaching out to each other, sharing their cultures, and learning from one another. Jake's communication device chimed one more time. The message was from a small research station on the edge of known space. A newly discovered species had made first contact with galactic civilization, and their first request was to hear the human music that creates winter. They had somehow received a copy of Lisa's performance and wanted to understand what it meant. "Looks like we have another assignment," Jake said, showing Lisa the message. Lisa smiled and stood up, finishing her coffee. "Then we better get started. We have a galaxy to teach." As they prepared to leave for their next cultural mission, Jake reflected on how much had changed since that night when he had simply mentioned Vivaldi's Four Seasons in casual conversation. He had never imagined that those words would lead to humanity becoming known throughout the galaxy as the species that could make others feel what they had never felt before. Lisa had indeed stolen the show that night, but she had given humanity something far more valuable than applause. She had given them a place in the galaxy based on their greatest strength, the ability to create beauty, share it with others, and help different forms of life understand each other through the universal language of art. The galaxy was listening now, and humanity finally had something truly important to say.